What do you think of the statement that Trump is doing all this deliberately to bring the economy down, causing an economic dip so that interest rates fall and the U.S. national debt remains affordable?
That is a master plan, but I doubt that it is a master plan. I think there are very few bullies on the playground who have a master plan. It's just, yes, we need to do something, take action. And I don't think there is a big master plan behind it. It could just be a factual consequence. Absolutely, but it is possible. We all know that if you just take this kind of action against you, it can also be a well-known picture of Trump pissing out. He just comes right back in with a fan, the dollar, that's standing right now. And everybody's sitting, really looking at it like, yeah, guys, can I still trust the dollar in my trade? And the BRICS countries, they already have a strategy in motion. Behind the scenes, they're working on a digital currency. Their message is basically, hey, we're BRICS, we're doing our own thing. Now with Saudi Arabia and the UAE joining in, we could suddenly see the US dollar losing its status as the primary currency for global trade. And that would present the US with a very different kind of problem.
Well, then also those strategic reserves of China in dollar reserves suddenly come into a different light. Would that be a Chinese master plan at all? Because there are no people who know that, of course.
It's such a complicated game of chess. In a chess game, you can still think a little bit logically, but economics comes into it. The people with the emotion you're just really stupid to think that you can influence a global market with your own actions. That goes all back and forth like pinball.
I agree with you that it is very difficult to influence. I just don't quite agree with your statement about the dollar, because if you look at the dollar, it's been I'll throw it on the screen for a moment too. It's been pretty high, so to speak. I mean, we have a very long period here, the dollar index of just from the 2015, that whole Biden period, that dollar has basically been pretty strong relative to the Trump period before that. Just the problem that creates, if you just look at the data, including recent research from Rabobank, which has looked just at indeed that trade deficit, you can see that exploded during Biden. And then again, if we look at the years before that, 2019, 18, 17, where Trump was at the time, actually kind of flat, was slightly higher than before that, but that's more the overall trend. So that makes me understand where it comes from. So when you consider what constitutes that trade deficit, it is rising significantly. Strangely though, I may have taken that item off the screen a bit too fast. And for me, the key point is that the light isn't directed at China. Just check out this graph.
Put service in here as well, because one of the pulls also from Europe. There is made of, yes, guys, you have the well-known seven, the Google, Facebook, who have global, a huge turnover, often don't get factored into this kind of trade deficit. But if you look at the sales of those 3-4 companies, those are all being decentralized. That all does come together in the value creation in the US stock market. I do want to see what that does to the trade balance, because the trade balance doesn't take into account the big five, the big tech five. Apple, of course, does in some measures. If you look at the sales of Facebook, Amazon, I think Amazon has also fairly been processed to sort of Facebook and Google. Don't you think? I don't know, right? But we can add up in a moment, tens of billions. Rowan, you're better at that. Those kinds of figures are also factored into these trade balance deficits. In fact, I doubt that.
Well, there is indeed quite a discussion about that, because it's particularly about how do you calculate that trade deficit, because that's not an easy sum either. And so you can indeed go back to the fact to how important this really is. Are other factors not important? Because there is also a school of thought, much more indeed about the purchasing power of the people in the country where you live, much more about the happiness index, although that's also fairly arbitrary, that those are actually important measures of success economically as well than such a trade deficit or trade surplus. However, in the Netherlands, they often focus very much on, because of course we just have a very big trade industry too, with the port, with the airport, you name it. But at the end of the day, of course, it's still about that purchasing power. And then if you look at what the Americans' purchasing power is, it's extreme, especially compared to a country like China, everything in the Middle East, even like Europe. Actually, the American now has discounted travel to Europe. So from that point of view, you could say that consumers in America are not feeling that much of this. In fact, maybe some leisure elements that were more expensive before. I mean, every American wants to explore Europe, but that was just very pricey for them. And so you actually look at what momentum does Trump have now, because he has another year to make sure that the things through now that he wants to get through, because otherwise the midterms and then the weather can change completely and he can get a lot less done. And just looking at that climate there, I don't feel like the electorate that voted for Trump really think this is wrong, this is going in the wrong direction, or this is wrong. Honestly, there's a lot of talk by economists of they're going to feel that, they're going to feel that, we're going to push that a few months into the future. Those boats have to go to America and you name it, and only then are you going to feel that in an economy. The way Trump is doing it now is of I call everything and then I take some things out. That's exactly how we are doing with companies, how we are with startups. We try it all and then we take out what doesn't work. And that mentality we're just not used to on the world stage. And if we also look at the stock market, people are saying, yes, at least I listened to an economist this week and he very easily made the argument, yes, 4 trillion has evaporated in the stock market since Liberation Day. Well, that's 4 trillion is 10% of the economy. Because why is that 10% of the economy? Because companies turn an average profit of 10%. So I'll just do it times 10. And I thought that was very simple reasoning. That you then say, okay, 40 trillion has evaporated from the US economy. No, it has not evaporated. You see it's gone to gold. You see it's gone to other assets. It's not suddenly gone from the economy. It's a living ecosystem, which is just saying equities are a little bit more difficult. Because look at that stock market. Then that's a tool that looks forward, that actually looks at how profitable are companies. That's the whole discussion that people are having in the stock market. The Forex market, conversely, serves as a referendum regarding the strength of a specific nation. And when you examine the Forex market and the dollar, to revisit your initial inquiry, Wesselink, America has indeed been perceived as relatively strong in the last 4 years, and we are essentially reverting to the meridian rather than returning to a weaker dollar. We are merely going back to a standard period.
So that's more than normal. But on the other hand, because you see now how much doubt there is about America, but also with respect to their dollar, we could always rely on America, and now we can't. That's really going to do something. There were already signs that there was doubt about the dollar. Let's just choose another currency. Maybe a basket of some in the form of a stable coin. Those conversations are always there, and it could never be done. Before it couldn't, but now suddenly it can. Now there are alternatives.
Yes, but even then, America is the one that then now says, I'll link that dollar to stable coins. I'm going to get that dollar into that stable coin industry because then I can control that again. And I think they're doing that very cleverly, and you don't get in there very quickly. So I just wonder, and then also if you look back, hey, in the 1917, and that we should get rid of from the gold standard, if you look back at that, at how the rest of the world reacted to that, it would have been the end of the dollar as well. So it's not that easy now.
It's also just a bit of a backlash against the trend that those BRICS countries are doing with such a digital currency. Trump just sees that happening. He thinks, well, I'm just going to turn my own digital currencies that are already on the market. I'm just going to put that dollar behind it. So then I'll keep that world reserve currency strong.
We're just reading tea leaves as well.
Yes, but still, that's partly what this podcast is for, of course, the comparison with 1970. Back then, America was still the undisputed leader in just about everything in this world. Technology, economic size, innovation, you name it. America used to be everything. However, that is just not the reality anymore. Even now, I can feel in our discussion the notion of Americans. They hold such significance that they continue to be the leading economy globally. That might be the case. We can analyze tea leaves deeply, but it is definitely not guaranteed that this will persist. And undoubtedly those nations, particularly China and Russia, along with possibly other countries in the distant East. Indeed, they are formidable players, whether in the BRICS framework or in another context, capable of voicing a significant counterpoint. I believe Trump recognizes this and disrupts it in a style reminiscent of New York real estate to check if he can manage to turn the tides. But will that be successful? Honestly, I'm not quite sure about that, whether that is indeed the case. We just talked about the dollar's role. I also read a lot about dollarization around the world. I agree with what was just mentioned. It's not a reality yet, and there is no BRICS currency or anything of that sort. However, it could happen very quickly. These are issues we should consider, but I think we already have the best perspective on it.
I think it is nice to see. I don't see America for the long term as the world power at all, but rather as a country that is still trying in the same old way to get something done that hasn't worked for a long time. They don't want to cooperate. That's really the whole story. They want to be the world power, and the rest of the world wants to cooperate. So the countries that are going to cooperate best with each other, they're going to collectively become the world power.